Have you ever gotten a Snapchat from a girl?
No, but I do have severe autism, I have a crippling addiction to Path of Exile for over 18,000 hours, and I do have a list of over 50 builds you can play in 3.27. Now before you go into the description and get that sheet and close this tab, allow me just a few minutes to explain a few very important things about this list, because I've done this for 5 years, and no matter how much I explain this, how much in detail I go, people still have questions, and people still don't watch this video. Okay, so view it at least for a few minutes. I'm going to go over these real quick. I don't have anything more to say after this, so there's no big explanation after this. Everything is already factored into this, okay? First of all, this is a League starter list. Right, this is revolving around League starters, not endgame builds, not something you can play if you know how to make 100 mirrors in the first week or something, right? This is about League starters. So this is designed to factor in the reliability of a build and how reliable it can get you to 2 Void Stones or even 4 Void Stones, clearing the first T17 map, all of this, right? This doesn't involve anything like Uber kills or whatever. Just general gameplay for a League starter. Some of these builds that we are featuring here, actually more than half of these even, have endgame versions. They have something in their POB already, or multiple POBs, multiple guides, some information, etc. you can build upon to go into the endgame to kill Ubers, to clear maps in 30 seconds or faster, whatever. Right? All of these things can be done with some of these builds, but this isn't the main focus of this. Okay, keep this in mind. Secondly, this build is also mainly targeted at beginner players, intermediate players, or players who just can't decide, or they don't have a good overview even though they're experienced, right? This isn't for the player who notoriously plays Path of Exile every single day, doesn't ever log out, or for the players who only have like 0.57 nanoseconds a day because their 17 wives and 527 children are waiting for them, all right? This is a build list for people who need this, for beginners who don't know most of these builds even, okay? Let me explain something about the rating here. Now, this is quite important as well, because the more stars you can see here, this means the better this build performs in that category. That means in terms of cost, which is the thing I've heard the most so far, means that the more stars there are, the cheaper this build actually is. The less stars there are, the more expensive it will get. This mostly applies to trade, but also partially applies to SSF. Though keep in mind that this build list is mostly focused to trade softcore because the most people play trade softcore. I myself have played SSF for 3.5 years, but I'm trying to not factor this in too much. Now you will see something like here, for example, in Kinetic Blast, Kinetic Rain, a build that isn't as costly potentially in an isolated vacuum, but given we have a lot of streamers playing this build, the items for this might get astronomically expensive, especially things you need to progress into the end game, into the mid game, whatever, right? All of these can get extremely expensive, meaning the cost here is kind of terrible. Something that is notoriously already expensive, like bow builds, have a cost of 2 because they are still expensive. No matter how many people are playing this, they will still be expensive. Of course, the supply will also increase for builds like these, but it usually doesn't offset each other too well. It's kind of annoying. Some other builds, for example, like Cold Dot or Chaos Dot, do profit of this, because most of these, right, Cold Dot and Chaos, both require ones that will just be byproducts of something that is trying to be an attack wand for people who buy attack wands for much more money, and therefore you can probably gear more reliable. This is also factored in already, and this is why some of these builds, even though they might not be the strongest, are already quite higher on the list because they just perform way better in the current patch. This also goes with what you're trying to do, right? There's a league this time around where you focus on breach, so you need a lot of clear, but there's also a lot of bosses to be killed, so it's also kind of like a bossing league, and all of these things again are factored in. I'm trying to also factor in, once we get the filter information on a rent like Thursday or Wednesday or something, that I can also factor in map layouts on the different tiers, like how good are they performing through the Atlas, like how good are they performing in T1 maps, T5 maps, how good are they performing in the natural T16s we'll get that we'll most likely play in the beginning at least, or how good are they performing in certain locations on the Atlas, because if we have something like Jungle Valley, people will likely play Jungle Valley because you don't have boss altars on this map, right? All of these things, again, are factored in here already, and this might be a bit different at how you would view these builds yourself in, again, a vacuum or in hardcore or in SSF, right? The last thing here that's kind of important is the coloring. Blue just means something additional, doesn't really matter. It's just some information stuff here for leveling or group play if you don't really like it, because these are obviously like solo builds. Then we have the colors here and some icons. Let me explain the icons first. We have those check marks here, just meaning that those are trusted builds, reliable builds. We know these work well. They haven't been changed too much or not at all. And we know these are reliable things you can start and they will always perform well or adequately at least. Then we have the upward strength chart here, means they have been buffed to some degree or indirectly. For example, Righteous Fire now has Nebulous with up to 450% elemental damage. That is kind of insane, right? You can do that now. Or something like minion builds, which have, I think, like 3 Bloodline Ascendancies already to be played with. That's kind of insane, right? Of course, I can't quantize everything, and I don't have everything already in here. For example, speculative stuff like how good actually is Kinetic Rain, because I believe it might not be as good. You can see a picture here of what I'm like seeing in the preview we have seen already about the overlaps that are so praised, and people are like, oh yeah, I can just calculate this damage times 8 or whatever because I have at least 4 to 5 overlaps, and then you see these overlaps and you're like, probably not. Maybe the mobs will just run out of there unless you're Warden and freezing them or whatever. These things are also something I have to take into consideration, and I will do my best to make sure that these are adequately ranked in here until League starts. So this might change. This will get updated hourly or daily at least, so keep this in mind. Next is downward trend, just meaning basically nerfs anything that nerfs this build to some degree. Of course, direct nerfs like less damage in the patch notes can be factored in here. Of course, keep in mind, Pekong, for example, got some new Groom Graft that is also increasing the damage again for at least the bouncing version, so it gets something out of this patch as well that's buffing it, right? And all these things again. Here, for example, for Cyclone is like a weird case. The only reason it's not in green is because you get 20% more Cyclone damage, but that doesn't include Shockwave, which has like a 340% multiplier already and is usually the main damage for these. And yeah, that's the reason why it's not in green. Green just means as viable as it says here. Those colors are kind of self-explanatory, but I'm still trying to explain this again. Yellow doesn't mean they're worse or something. Usually some of these are at least like equivalent to most of the green ones, and might even be better if you like the archetype more, right? If it's something you like a Zoomancer, then it might just perform better than any of those in here for you. However, these usually mean that there's something maybe wrong with them. Like maybe they are a bit more pricey than some of the alternatives you have in the green section, or they require 2 buttons to be played, or even more buttons, or some complicated gem setups, or some complicated strats, or they may be low, they may be clunky. Some things can be wrong with these, or they're just performing a bit worse than the green section. Doesn't mean they're bad, they're still very, very close. This means like half an hour later for the campaign. If you take 6 hours or 6.5 hours, nobody really cares about this too much, right? And then if we go down, this also increases and gets more dramatic. For example, something like Frostbling Ignite requires a unique body armor that might not be as easy to be dropped in solo cell phone. That's why it's not on green. Otherwise it might be because it's easy. Also something like Power Siphon Mines, which are still good, but they have also been nerfed. So it's whatever, right? And this topic continues into the red section. Now the red section is quite important to note here that these builds are still playable. You can still play most of these. I'm saying most of these because I'm going to show you something in a second here. You can still play these. These are fine. Something like Rage Vortex is just extremely off meta, and you rarely see like at least like a dozen people play this every league, at least for now. Might be more once people figure out it's actually a good build, but there's a lack of information about this, a lack of just general builds you can choose from, so it's really hard for me to recommend this to a beginner if there's nothing I can actually recommend here, right? Others just outperform, or they're just terrible for the content, or they just haven't been updated in ages and people still believe they're good, but they're actually subpar compared to other entries on the list, or require a lot of buttons, etc., right? Something like Bone Shadow, for example, has received a buff this patch, but this build still has systemic issues that hinders it really from being a good thing. It's extremely annoying to play, and even people like Khan, who just play exclusively melees and has played Bone Shadow for like, I don't know, like 2 years or something, even they have decided, like, let's just keep it there. It's not worth it. It's way too complicated and just performs worse than something like melee slams, which are on the top of the chart. And then on the bottom here, There's some more like historic entries. I'm just keeping these because people have been asking me to keep these in there, and they are usually not working. That's why they're counted as dead, and they also have a big skull emote here. So please do not pick these. These are not playable in the current patch. I'm just listing this here in case something comes up. Maybe there's a patch or whatever. And yeah, that's basically it. So for the list, I hope this explains the things well and you understand what's going on here. If there's anything that is left unanswered, just feel free to put a comment down in the video or just ask me live on stream. Usually once League starts, I'm usually live for like 12 to 18 hours every day. And this time around, I'm also not playing as Zeph. I've played as Zeph for the past 3.5 years now, but I decided to play trade again. I was a really good trade economy player back then, so I'm curious to see if I can still make as much currency as I did back then, which was like, I think, like 3 mirrors in the first week or something. But yeah, we'll see how I'm performing, how much fun I'm having, what builds I'm going to play, because I do plan to do quite a few of them now that I have all tools at my availability and I don't have to farm an SSF for like 3 weeks for some generic 2 chaos unique item or something. But yeah, that's it. I hope that helped. I know this is not like a recommendation by me. I don't show much footage here. I hope this is still okay and alright with you, because I don't want to have my videos like turn into 30-minute nightmares. I just want to give the most information I can in the shortest amount of possible time, and I think that's it. I hope I've achieved that. Again, if anything is still amiss, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them all the time, wherever you want to, even in my Discord. And yeah, that's it. I hope that helped, and stay tuned next out. Have fun in the coming patch, and good luck on your loot. Bye-bye.